DJI just dropped a new firmware version for the Osmo Pocket 3, including a new lossless zoom mode to get you even closer to your subject, and also something to help with your breathing. It's been quite a while since DJI gave us a firmware update for the Pocket 3, and now we finally have one. And the two key features are firstly a new lossless zoom feature, which according to DJI allows you to zoom in by a factor of 2 on your subject without any loss in resolution or image quality. And the second key feature is a new breathing compensation feature, is aimed at doing away with that annoying fluttering you get as your camera adjusts focus. So in today's video we're going to go through the update process and we're going to check out those new features and see just how good they are. So there's quite a bit to cover, so as usual I'll place the chapters up here and on the video timeline, but before we get started, the usual disclaimer: this video is not sponsored, paid for, or influenced in any way. I purchased all of the equipment with my own money and the opinions are entirely my own. And of course, if you enjoy the video, please remember to hit that like button and consider subscribing to the channel for a lot more similar content. So let's get on with it. Strangely, if you head over to the support pages of the DJI website, you will find no mention of the new firmware. But if you open up the DJI Mimo app and connect to your Pocket 3, a message at the top of the screen will tell you that a new firmware version is available. And in order to update, all you need to do is tap on the message and follow the prompts. Note that the installation will pause at the 50% mark, which is when the firmware is fully downloaded, and will wait for you to hit the install button in order to continue the process. And after a couple of minutes, the update is complete, and your Pocket 3 will reboot and confirm the successful update. Okay, so having performed our upgrade, if we go to the main preview screen, you'll notice there's a new little icon here next to where it says 4K 30. This is the new lossless zoom function, which is called Med-Tele zoom, which I guess is medium telephoto. Now this has a full frame equivalent of 40 millimeters, which I wouldn't really call telephoto, but be that as it may. So this function works as on or off. So here you can see I've turned it on, the little icon turns a yellow color, and you can see the picture is twice the size, or I can turn it back off again. Now this is different, of course, to the normal digital zoom. You can see over here on the right hand side I can zoom in increments or back out. But according to DJI, the new Med-Tele mode maintains full 4K resolution. Now there are a few limitations of the Med-Tele zoom mode. Firstly, it only works in standard video mode and no other modes, and it only works together with the normal color profile. So it does not work with the log color profile or HLG. Another key limitation is that it cannot be switched during an active recording. If I start the recording here, you'll notice that the icon now disappears and is no longer available. Digital zoom, of course, continues to work even during a recording. Now, one nice bonus feature is that it works in combination with the digital zoom. So I can use the Med-Tele zoom mode to zoom in to double the size, and then I can zoom in even further using the digital zoom. Now, of course, the digital zoom is simply cropping in on the image, and this is something that could also be done in video editing, and we'll compare the results of that later on. Now, the Med-Tele mode is also available through the app. You can see the icon up here in the top right, and I can enable or disable it. You can see in the app it turns blue when it's enabled and white when it is disabled. And here too, it is not possible to change during the active recording. So if I hit the record button, you'll notice that it is now grayed out and can no longer be activated. And of course here too I can combine both the Med-Tele mode with the digital zoom, just as I did in the previous example. Now the other new feature that we are interested in is the new breathing compensation, and in order to find that we're going to scroll over to the settings, and down next to where you have the focusing mode you now have a new option here, breathing compensation, and by default it is turned off, so I can just tap on it to enable it, tap on it again to disable it, and we'll test that out in more detail later on. Now the breathing compensation feature does not seem to be available anywhere in the Mimo app. If I go into the advanced settings here, you can find focus mode, where I would expect to find it, but it is nowhere to be found in this list. Perhaps it will be added in a future update, but for now the only way to enable it is on the camera itself. So let's start out with a still outdoor scene. We are filming at 4K 30 frames per second, and let's go ahead and use the standard digital zoom to zoom in on the image. Now keep in mind that this is simply cropping in on the sensor, so effectively we are reducing the resolution to 1080p. So now let's compare that to the new Med-Tele zoom. At this magnification, I would say they look pretty similar. So let's zoom in closer to see if there's any real difference. At this magnification, looking at both the shed and the background, I think it's pretty clear that the Med-Tele zoom provides much better detail than the standard digital zoom. Once again, we'll start with the standard view and zoom in using the digital zoom. And again, we're going to compare that to the Med-Tele zoom. Again, there's no big difference between the two here, so let's zoom in for a closer look. And once again, the Med-Tele zoom mode clearly shows better resolution and detail. This time we'll start with both images already zoomed in. Digital zoom on the left and Med-Tele zoom on the right. Again, there's really nothing to choose between the two, so let's zoom in a bit further and do some pixel peeking. So in this example, at very close distance, I'm not sure I'm seeing that much difference between the two, but what do you think? And for one final example, once again digital zoom on our left and the Med-Tele zoom on the right. And once again, apart from a small color difference, really nothing to choose between the two images. Let's zoom in a little closer. Yeah, I think slight advantage to the Med-Tele zoom, but you really have to zoom in to be able to see it. So before we get to testing the breathing compensation function, let's first talk about what lens breathing even is. And to do that, let's do a quick demonstration. So right now I have continuous autofocus enabled on the camera, so if I bring an object into view between the camera and my face, obviously the camera now focuses on that object, and if I move the object out of view, the focus returns to my face. So far so good. Now let's just do that again, but this time when I move the object away, I want you to pay attention to the outer edges of the image, and you'll notice that as the focus changes, so too does the field of view, so it kind of zooms out slightly. Now ideally we'd like just the focus to change and not the field of view, and it's this undesirable change in the field of view with the focus that's referred to as lens breathing. Now, if you have a large, sophisticated lens with lots of elements, it's much easier to adjust the focus without any lens breathing. But in the case of the Pocket 3, we have a very small lens with very few elements, so it's much more difficult. And so what DJI has done with this new firmware update is created an electronic compensation, which basically monitors the change in the field of view and tries to adjust for it electronically by adjusting the crop in and out on the sensor. So that's the theory. Let's now see how well it works. So now that I've enabled it, let's see how well it works. So once again, let's bring the object into view between the camera and my face. And once again, we'll remove it. How did that perform? Did it look any better than previously? Let's try it again. And then remove it again. Now I'm looking at it on the screen here, and to me it does look better than it did before. But let's do a side-by-side test. So near object, back to my face, near object, back to my face, near object, back to my face. What do you think? How well does the breathing compensation work? So let's start out with the obvious headline feature, and that is of course the so-called Med-Tele mode. And DJI, frankly, you need to get some better marketing people to come up with some better naming. But anyway, now the Pocket 3 isn't the first camera to have such a feature. If you take a look at this guy, for example, the Insta360 Ace Pro 2, it has a mode which it calls Clarity Zoom, a much better name, which basically does the same thing. When you enable it, it crops in on the center of the sensor and doubles the size of the image. But there is one key difference. The Ace Pro 2 has an 8K sensor, so when you do that crop, you are still getting a genuine 4K image. In the case of the Pocket 3, now I cannot find anywhere the exact pixel count specifications for its sensor, but one thing is clear, it's not an 8K sensor. So when it crops in on the middle of the sensor and doubles the size of the image, it's doing so by pixel interpolation, or put very simply, it's inventing pixels that aren't really there. Now, I'm not saying that it's not doing a good job, and clearly the R&D guys at DJI are doing a better job than the marketing guys, because in most of the examples I've seen, it does provide a more detailed image than the standard digital zoom. But here's the thing, if you watch the review videos on this new feature, including this one, you'll see a common theme, and that is that you really don't see any difference until you start zooming in really close. And then of course there is the annoyance that you can't just decide to use it during a recording and gradually zoom in and out like you can with the digital zoom. You have to enable it or disable it before you start recording. So overall, I think for some people there's an opportunity here to really improve their image quality, but for most people it is a minor enhancement, and I don't think it really deserves the hype that it's currently getting online. Next, let's talk about the breathing compensation feature. Now for me, this is a much better enhancement. I think my tests showed that it worked pretty well, and I think for anybody doing unboxing videos, product demonstrations, anybody who's talking to the camera and holding up products to the camera, this feature can definitely improve your image quality. Now these are not the only two new features in the update. In addition to these, we now have D-Log support for webcam mode and a new background upload features, but for me the two that we covered I think are the most significant. So overall, yes, it's nice to get an update, and overall it's pretty positive, but frankly after so many months without an update, I'm a little disappointed that there isn't more in it. For example, they could have added things like the ability to pause and resume recording, such as Insta360 has given us, the ability to schedule recording, the ability to do interval recording, maybe better interplay with the DJI mics, allowing you to wake up the microphone or wake up the camera from the microphone, and I'm sure there's many other enhancements that users would like to see, and if you have specific ideas on features you would like to see, please go ahead and drop those into the comments section. So that's going to cover it for another video. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please remember to give us a like and consider subscribing to the channel for a lot more similar content. If you have any comments, any questions, if you have suggestions for future videos, please drop those into the comments section. Otherwise, thanks for watching.